The phone rang just as midnight snow began to fall. The screen glowed Grandpa. My thumb hovered before answering. I hadn't spoken to him since Thanksgiving. When I finally swiped, all I heard was wind and a trembling voice. "They said, there's no room for me at my own table," he whispered. Then silence. Just the faint rattle of breath and the hollow echo of a bus passing by. By dawn, my phone buzzed again, not from him, but from a number labeled County Hospital. "This is Nurse Helen," the voice said. "Are you related to Mr. Walter Hayes?" "Yes, he's my grandfather." "He was found early this morning shivering on a park bench near Birch Avenue. Severe hypothermia, early frostbite." He kept saying your name. I remember staring out the window then, at the perfectly decorated houses across our cul-de-sac, all sparkling like a Hallmark card. Candy cane lights, matching wreaths, snow-blown lawns. Everything perfect, everything fake, except our house. Ours was too quiet, too clean, too guilty. When I rushed downstairs, Mom was stirring cocoa, humming Silent Night. Dad sat by the fireplace scrolling through his phone, pretending not to notice me. I asked, "Where's Grandpa?" Dad looked up, casual as ever. "He left. Didn't tell us where." Mom added, "He's been forgetful lately. Probably went to visit someone." "He does that." But something inside me twisted. "He called me last night," I said. "Said you told him there was no room at the table." Mom froze. The spoon clinked against the mug. "You must have misheard." I didn't. Every word replayed like a nightmare. No room. My own table. At that exact moment, my phone buzzed again. A message from Ms. Ramirez, our neighbor. It was a photo. Grandpa sitting alone at the bus stop holding his suitcase, staring straight at our lit-up window. "Did he get home okay?" she texted. He looked so lost. The truth burned through my chest. I turned to my parents. "You left him outside." Dad's jaw tightened. "Don't start, Nate. You did, didn't you?" I shouted. "You told him there wasn't room." He stood up, towering. "You think you understand adult decisions? You have no idea what that man put us through." Mom's voice cut in thin and sharp. "He sold his house for pennies, wasted his savings, and now he expects us to carry him." "We can't, Nathan. We just can't." "But it's Christmas," I said, my voice cracking. "He's family." Neither answered. Dad just turned back to the fire. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. At 10 a.m., I went to the hospital. The smell of antiseptic mixed with pine-scented air freshener made me nauseous. The nurse led me to room 214. He looked so small under the white blanket, cheeks pale, lips trembling. But when I took his hand, he smiled weakly. "Knew you'd come, kid." "Grandpa, what happened?" He tried to speak, coughed, then whispered, "They told me the restaurant table was full. Said they couldn't fit 5 people. I said I'd sit anywhere, even at the bar." His voice cracked. "Your father said no room. Like I was luggage." I wanted to cry, but he patted my hand instead. "Don't be mad, Nate. Sometimes people forget who set the table for them in the first place." Before I could reply, a nurse entered with discharge papers. "He's stable now," she said. "Needs rest and warmth. He's lucky someone found him. Someone. Not them, not my parents. Someone else had saved him." As I helped him dress, his coat jingled softly. Inside one pocket, a small red ornament dangled from a string, the kind we used to hang together when I was a kid. A tiny tag clung to it, for Nate. I shook it. Something rattled inside. "What's this?" I asked. "Just a keepsake," he said faintly. "Open it when you have to." When I brought him home, Dad refused to open the door. "He can't stay here," he said. "Not tonight. He's freezing," I shouted. "Then take him to a motel," Dad said, turning the lock. Grandpa touched my shoulder. "It's okay, kid. I'll manage." "No," I said. "You won't," but he smiled, the kind of tired, final smile that felt like goodbye. "Some things you have to find out on your own." He shuffled down the porch, snow collecting on his shoulders. Mom watched from behind the curtain. I stood there, fists shaking, until his shadow disappeared down the street. That night, I couldn't sleep. I held the ornament, turning it under the glow of the Christmas tree. My fingers found a seam near the top. When I twisted, the cap loosened slightly. But Mom appeared out of nowhere, snatching it from me. "Decoration!" she snapped. "Don't touch our things." "Our things?" I repeated, staring at her. "It's from Grandpa. She didn't answer, just placed it back on the tree like a trophy and walked away. Later, while she and Dad went upstairs, I took the ornament again and hid it in my hoodie pocket. At 12:04 a.m., my phone buzzed one more time. A new voicemail. Grandpa's voice, shaky and low. "If you're hearing this, Nate, come to cabin 12 Lake Birch, bring the red ornament, and don't trust them." My breath caught. Cabin 12? Lake Birch? He had no cabin. No car. Nothing. I turned toward the living room window. Headlights flashed outside. Dad's truck idled in the driveway. And when I tried to step toward the door, I heard keys jingle. He stood in the doorway, face half shadowed by the Christmas tree's glow. "Where do you think you're going?" he asked. In that moment, I felt the ornament press against my palm. Something clicked inside, a small piece of metal sliding loose. I reached into the hollow and pulled out a tiny memory card no bigger than a fingernail. Whatever Grandpa had hidden inside this ornament was the real reason there was no room at the table. The road to Lake Birch was silent and empty, except for the crunch of tires over ice and the slow whine of the wind against the car. It was still dark when I reached the old cabins by the frozen lake. Their roofs were weighed down by snow, the kind that looked beautiful until you remembered how cold it really was. Cabin 12 stood at the far end, a crooked wooden number hanging by one nail. Grandpa's voice echoed in my head, "Cabin 12. Bring the ornament." The lock was snapped open. The door swung when I pushed, creaking like a warning. Inside smelled like stale coffee and pine dust. The space heater in the corner hummed faintly, the coil still warm. Someone had just been here, recently. On the table sat a coffee mug, a legal pad, and a business card. The mug had a ring of dried brown circles, and on the pad, in shaky handwriting, were the words, "No room." They took it all. The card read, "Evergreen Oak Senior Investments, LLC, with my uncle's name embossed in silver underneath." I froze. My uncle Peter was Mom's older brother, the one who always bragged about private investments and retirement funds. If he was involved, it wasn't family help. It was business. Cold business. I searched the cabin, checking drawers and cupboards. A small metal key was taped under the table, Grandpa's trick, the same one he used for hiding candy when I was a kid. The tag on it said "spare room." Back home, the house was eerily calm. Mom and Dad were dressed in matching red sweaters, heading out with thermoses in hand. "We're volunteering at the church pantry today," Mom said cheerfully. "Maybe you should come too," Dad added. "It'll keep your mind off things." I nodded, pretending to agree. But the moment their car backed out of the driveway, I slipped upstairs to Grandpa's old bedroom. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old aftershave. The photo of him and Grandma still hung crooked above the dresser. The bottom drawer was locked, the same drawer he always kept a small blue folder in. I used the key I'd found at the cabin. The lock clicked open. Inside was that blue folder, thick with papers. On the front was a sticky note in Grandpa's handwriting. "If you're reading this, they lied." I opened it. My hands trembled as I flipped through page after page. A durable power of attorney, notarized just 2 days before Christmas, named my mother as Grandpa's agent, the person with full legal control of his finances. Attached behind it was a property closing statement. Grandpa's house had been sold last week for $385,000, with the payment wired to Evergreen Oak Senior Investments, LLC, my uncle's company. My throat tightened. Grandpa's home, the one he built after Grandma died, was gone. Not rented. Not inherited. Sold. Before I could process, my phone buzzed, a message from Ms. Ramirez. "He didn't wander, Nate. Uber dropped him at your driveway 6:18 p.m. I heard your dad say, 'You can't stay here tonight, Pop. I'm so sorry.'" A minute later, she sent a screenshot from her Ring camera. The image was grainy but unmistakable. Grandpa standing outside our front door, suitcase in hand, head bowed, snow piling on his shoulders while my dad's silhouette filled the doorway. The audio clip played next. Dad's voice, cold, final. "You can't stay here tonight, Pop." I slammed the laptop shut. My heart raced. I needed to know what was on that memory card from the ornament. I inserted it into my computer. 2 files appeared. Video 1, December 20th. Grandpa sat in a clinic, joking with a nurse, solving word puzzles, reciting months backward. The doctor smiled. Cognitive screen normal, Mr. Hayes. Video 2, December 22nd. Grandpa sat across from a white-haired attorney. Add the Christmas clause, he said firmly. If I'm denied a seat at my family table on Christmas, any relative involved forfeits everything. I froze. The Christmas clause. That's why Mom and Dad didn't want him there. If he sat at the table, they lost control of the money. In the folder were even more emails between Mom and my uncle. Can we expedite the house sale? Funds must clear by Deck 24 for tax purposes. Confirm wire. Every word dripped with calculation. I checked the time, 10:18 a.m. I had barely 2 hours before noon. The note at the cabin had said, "Meet me at the church pantry at noon. Don't tell your parents." I drove back to Lake Birch hoping I'd misread everything, that he'd be there smiling, telling me it was just one of his strange tests. But when I entered the cabin again, a chill ran down my spine. The coffee mug was gone. A new one sat in its place, steam still curling from it. The heater buzzed louder. Someone was still here, or had just been. I checked under the doormat, a rusty cabin key cold and wet. When I opened the old tin by the stove, I found a folded note in Grandpa's tight, blocky handwriting. If you found this, I'm proud. Meet me at the church pantry at noon. Don't tell your parents. Outside, the wind howled like sirens. My phone buzzed again. A bank alert. $385,000 wire transfer completed. Before I could think, another message popped up. Unknown number. Don't go to the church. We already took care of him. My blood ran cold. I looked around the cabin, at the new coffee mug, the faint footprints melting into the rug, the smell of aftershave that wasn't Grandpa's. I sprinted back to my car, fumbling for my phone to call the police, but then I stopped. If I called now, I'd have to explain everything. The emails, the hidden will, the clause. I had no proof besides what was on that card. The church pantry came into view just before noon, its parking lot packed with cars and volunteers. My heart pounded as I walked to the side door. A figure moved inside, tall, broad-shouldered, wiping his hands with a white towel. The pantry door opened slowly. Standing there, framed by flickering fluorescent light, was my Uncle Peter, Mom's brother, the same name printed on the Evergreen Oaks business card. His smile was too calm, too rehearsed. "Well, look who found the ornament," he said softly, eyes glinting. "You really shouldn't have come here, Nate. Family business isn't for kids." And as the door shut behind me, I realized I wasn't alone. Someone else was breathing in the dark, slow, shallow, watching. "Family should stay out of grown-up business," Uncle Peter said coldly, stepping between me and the pantry's exit. The smell of canned soup and bleach mixed in the air, the humming fluorescent lights flickering like nervous heartbeats. Rows of donated goods surrounded us like silent witnesses. Canned corn, cranberry sauce, green beans stacked into neat towers. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You shouldn't have come, Nate. You're stirring up trouble you don't understand." I clenched the ornament tighter in my fist. "Where's my grandfather?" He lifted a manila folder and tapped it against his palm. "Right where he belongs, under protection. The court agrees his declining mental state requires intervention. Emergency guardianship hearing, 3 o'clock today. Your mother's the petitioner. I'm her advisor. Guardianship?" My voice cracked. "You mean you're trying to take control of his life?" He smiled, thin and sharp. "We're saving him from himself. You should be grateful." I reached into my bag, pulling up my phone. "I have proof he's fine." He chuckled, clearly amused. "Proof?" I opened video 1 on my screen. Grandpa sitting in the clinic, laughing, answering every question perfectly. The doctor's voice echoed, "Cognitive screen normal." Uncle Peter leaned closer, unimpressed. "A video isn't a diagnosis, kid. You really think a few happy clips will outweigh an official medical report?" "I've got more," I said, swiping to video 2. Grandpa was in the attorney's office, voice steady, eyes alert. "Add the Christmas clause," he said. "If I'm denied a seat at my family table on Christmas, any relative involved forfeits everything." Peter's face twitched. "Just slightly." "That will's outdated," he said flatly. "There's a new one. Signed yesterday." A sound broke the silence, the soft shuffle of shoes from behind the shelves. The pantry coordinator, Mrs. Green, appeared, holding a box of donations. Her voice trembled. "I don't mean to interrupt, but your grandfather came here early this morning. Around 6. He brought muffins. Told me to give this to you if you showed up. She handed me a red envelope. The paper was cold, like it had been sitting near the door for hours. My name was written in Grandpa's handwriting, shaky but strong. I tore it open. Inside was a small receipt from the Lake Birch cabins marked paid in cash, and a yellow post-it stuck to the back. Open the ornament again. There's a second slot. My hand shook as I twisted the ornament's base. The plastic shifted with a faint click, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. A thin microfilm strip unrolled. Faint numbers printed along it like ghost ink. It was a wire transfer record. I squinted and felt the blood drain from my face. Funds from Evergreen Oak Senior Investments to my parents' joint account, labeled consultation fee. The door burst open. 2 uniformed officers stepped in, snow melting from their boots. Nathan Hayes? One asked. I froze. Yes? You're under investigation for the possible abduction of a vulnerable adult, the officer said calmly. Your parents reported you may have taken your grandfather against his will. That's insane, I said. He called me. He asked me to meet him. Sir, we just need to ask a few questions. Please step outside. They led me toward the curb, their radios crackling. Uncle Peter followed, his smirk smug and satisfied. This could all go away, he murmured in my ear. Just hand over the ornament. Delete those little videos. You're in over your head, kid. Families should stay united, don't you think? I clenched my fist so tight around the ornament I felt the edges bite into my palm. Where is he, Peter? I whispered. Where's my grandfather? He leaned close enough that I could smell his cologne, crisp, artificial. Probably where old promises go, he said softly. To the bottom of a lake. My knees nearly buckled. The officer told him to step back, but Peter raised his hands innocently. Just trying to help. Then, out of nowhere, Mrs. Green appeared again, panting, holding something heavy. No, she said firmly. He's not gone. Your grandpa came back right after sunrise. He gave me his bag, said, if I'm late, give it to my grandson. She set the battered duffel bag on the curb and unzipped it. Inside, wrapped in an old towel, was an antique wooden table leaf, the kind you'd use to extend a dining table. Our family crest was carved into the side, faded but unmistakable. A note was taped across the surface. If there's no room for me, move the table. The police officers exchanged confused glances. I stared at the carving, feeling the weight of it, literal and emotional. Grandpa wasn't hiding. He was planning something. By the time they released me, it was nearly 3 o'clock, just in time for the guardianship hearing at the county courthouse. I carried the duffel inside like it was evidence, which, in a way, it was. Mom and Dad were already there, sitting side by side in the front row. Dad looked tense. Mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a grieving daughter. Their attorney spoke smoothly. My clients are merely seeking to protect an elderly man from exploitation. Sadly, their son has been manipulated by him. I felt my stomach twist. Manipulated? By the only person who ever told me the truth? The judge adjusted her glasses. Where is Mr. Hayes now? Before the lawyer could answer, the side door creaked open. Every head turned. Grandpa walked in. Alone. His coat was dusty, his shoes soaked, but his eyes burned brighter than Christmas lights. The courtroom went silent except for the echo of his slow steps. He carried the table leaf under his arm and placed it gently on the witness stand. Your Honor, he said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. That wood contains the original deed to my house, hidden where my family would least expect it. Mom's face drained of color. Dad looked like someone had just ripped the rug out from under him. Uncle Peter shifted uneasily in his seat. And I, for the first time that day, finally understood. Grandpa wasn't a victim in this story. He was the one who had set the trap. The judge leaned forward. Mr. Hayes, she said, are you telling this court that the deed has been concealed inside that table leaf? Grandpa smiled faintly. Yes, ma'am. And that it proves who the real thieves at this table are. Every whisper in the room fell silent. The game had just changed, and none of them were ready for the next move. The courtroom seemed to tilt under the weight of Grandpa's next move. The air thickened with silence as he set the antique table leaf on the witness stand. It looked ordinary, scratched oak, faded finish, but the way he handled it made everyone lean forward. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a dull butter knife from the courthouse cafe, and slid it into a thin groove along the wood. The sound of cracking varnish echoed through the room. Everyone held their breath. Then with one firm twist, he pried open a narrow panel. A sealed plastic sleeve slid out, dusty and yellowed with age. Inside lay the original deed to his house and a second paper, neatly folded, its ink a deep blue that looked almost fresh. The judge gestured for the bailiff to bring it over. "Mr. Hayes," she said, adjusting her glasses, "what exactly are we looking at here?" Grandpa stood straighter than I'd seen him in months. "That, Your Honor, is my house deed and the addendum to my will, what I call the Christmas clause." His voice carried, firm and unshaking. "It states that if any member of my family denies me a seat at my own Christmas table, they forfeit all claims to my estate. Everything then goes to my grandson and my chosen charities." Murmurs erupted across the courtroom. The judge read the addendum aloud. Every word cut through the air like glass. "If any descendant or spouse bars me from my family Christmas table, they forfeit any claim to my estate. All proceeds go to my grandson, plus endowments to Meals on Wheels and the church pantry." Mom's mouth fell open. Dad went pale. Uncle Peter's tie suddenly looked too tight. The judge turned to Grandpa. "And the guardianship claim?" Without a word, Grandpa pulled another paper from his briefcase, a letter from his physician dated December 20th. "No signs of cognitive decline, dementia, or impairment," the judge read aloud. "Mr. Hayes is fully capable of managing his own affairs." Then the courtroom doors opened again, and a short man with a binder nearly as big as his torso entered, escorted by the bailiff. Grandpa nodded toward him. "That's Mr. Patel, a forensic accountant I hired before Christmas." Patel placed his binder on the table with a thud. "Evergreen Oaks Senior Investments, LLC," he began, flipping through pages, "has no record of actual senior clients, properties, or services. It's a shell entity, designed for laundering estate proceeds." He looked directly at my uncle. "2 disbursements from the $385,000 sale of the Hayes property. One to the mortgage account of Mr. and Mrs. Carter, your parents, Nate, and another to a consulting account belonging to Peter Dalton, your mother's brother." The room fell silent. You could almost hear my mom's breath catch. She stood abruptly, tears glistening but controlled, the kind she practiced in mirrors. "We were protecting him," she cried. "He's been paranoid for years. He forgets things, leaves the stove on, talks to himself. We were just trying to keep him safe." Grandpa turned calm as ever. "I haven't used a stove since my wife died," he said softly. "I eat at the diner every night. Ask Linda." From the back row, a voice piped up. "That's true, Your Honor." It was Linda, the diner waitress who'd known him for 20 years. She held up a napkin, the kind he used to doodle notes on. He remembers everyone's orders, tells the same jokes, and pays with exact change. "He's sharper than half the folks who come in for coffee." The judge tapped her pen on the bench. "Enough." She looked toward my parents, her tone colder than the December wind outside. "I am freezing all accounts associated with Evergreen Oaks effective immediately. Emergency return orders for misappropriated funds will be entered. Guardianship petition, denied. We'll set a full hearing on the will for January 3rd. Mom slumped into her chair, sobbing into her hands. Dad leaned over the table, whispering through his teeth so only I could hear. "You think you've won, kid? You don't even know what he did to you." The words sent a chill through me. "What do you mean?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, Mom reached into her purse and pulled out something I never expected, a worn photograph. She slid it across the table toward me. In it, a newborn baby lay in a hospital crib, a tag around its wrist reading Nathan Hayes, but the name was crossed out in black ink. On the back of the photo, written in faint pen, were 2 words, "Ask about Lily." My heart pounded. "Who's Lily?" I demanded, looking from Mom to Dad to Grandpa. Grandpa's hand trembled slightly on the table. His eyes, once warm and steady, turned heavy and haunted. He closed them for several seconds, as if summoning the courage to let ghosts out of their graves. When he opened them again, the kindness was gone. "She's my daughter," he said quietly. "And your real mother," the room blurred. I could hear whispers rippling behind me, but everything felt distant, muffled, like sound underwater. Mom, or the woman I thought was my mother, pressed her hands over her face. "We were trying to protect you," she whispered. "You don't understand what he did." Grandpa shot her a look so sharp it could cut glass. "What I did? You begged me to let you keep him after your sister died. You said you'd raise him as your own. Give him a life I couldn't. I agreed. On one condition. The judge cleared her throat, her curiosity barely concealed. Mr. Hayes, this isn't relevant to the guardianship hearing. But Grandpa kept going. It's the reason for everything. For the will. The clause. The Christmas test. My pulse hammered in my ears. What condition? I asked, my voice trembling. He looked right at me, and for the first time I saw regret in his eyes. Deep, endless regret. That they never tell you who you really are, he said, and that every Christmas they leave a chair open for me, so you'd always remember where you came from. The judge announced a 15-minute recess. The gavel struck. I barely heard it. Out in the hallway, Grandpa touched my shoulder. His hand was steady now. They told you I took you in, Nate, he said quietly. But the truth is, I let them keep you, on one terrible condition. The hallway lights flickered. My breath fogged the cold glass of the window. And for the first time in my life, I realized Christmas wasn't about who sat at the table. It was about who had been missing from it all along. The courthouse hallway buzzed with murmurs and footsteps, like a hive of restless bees. Lawyers whispered, reporters scribbled, and the faint smell of coffee drifted from the vending machines. Grandpa and I sat together on a wooden bench near the window, the winter sunlight painting pale stripes across the floor. His hand, rough and warm, rested on mine. Your mom, Lily, was my thunder. He began quietly, his eyes fixed on the snow outside. She had your fire, that same stubborn heart. She got sick young, gave birth alone. Your father left before you even opened your eyes. And your aunt, her sister, wanted a child so badly she could barely look at you without crying. I had the papers ready to bring you home. But then I saw her holding you like you were the last candle in a storm. I swallowed hard, my chest tight. So you just gave me away? He shook his head. I let them adopt you. On one condition, that every Christmas my chair would stay open, my plate would be set, and my place would never be taken. That was the promise. The one rule they couldn't break. I stared at him, tears pricking my eyes. And when they broke it, he finished the thought for me, his voice low but firm. They lost everything they thought they owned. They gambled with family, and the clause made sure they'd pay. The bailiff's voice echoed down the hall. Court is back in session. Grandpa stood slowly, straightening his coat, the red ornament still in his hand. We walked back inside together. The judge adjusted her robe and looked at Grandpa. Mr. Walker, do you have any final evidence before I make a ruling? Grandpa nodded. Yes, Your Honor, just one thing. He raised the ornament slightly. This. He turned to Linda, the diner waitress who had come to support him, the same woman who had given him warmth and a seat when his family didn't. Linda, he said softly, would you play the audio? Linda pulled out her phone and tapped play. The courtroom filled with static for a moment, then two voices crackled through the speaker. Dad's voice, cold and unmistakable. Once we move the old man's money, we'll tell him the reservation's full. Say the host messed up. If he shows up, we call security. Then Mom's voice, laughing under her breath. No room. No plate, no chair. He'll learn. The sound hit like a bomb. Mom's eyes widened, tears pooling. Dad's head dropped into his hands. Even the judge froze, pen halfway through a note. When the recording ended, silence smothered the room. Then the judge spoke, her tone sharp as ice. As of now, the Christmas clause is in full effect. The estate, accounts, and assets are hereby transferred to the beneficiary listed, Mr. Nathan Hayes. All charitable donations to Meals on Wheels and the church pantry will proceed as written. This court is forwarding evidence of fraud and financial exploitation to the district attorney's office for immediate investigation. Mom sobbed openly. Dad just stared at the floor, hollow. My chest felt like it might cave in. I should have felt victorious, but all I could see was the wreckage of what used to be my family. Then Grandpa did something no one expected. He turned to the judge again, pulling a second envelope from his coat pocket. There's one more document, he said. A second will, one I never told anyone about. Because if my family ever left me outside on Christmas, the table was never meant to stay in the house. It was meant to move. The judge carefully unfolded the papers. Her eyebrows lifted as she read. This says the Walker house and all attached property are to be transferred into a community trust, to be called No Room Kitchen, A year-round pantry and Christmas banquet for anyone turned away from their own families. A ripple of shock swept through the room. The judge kept reading. Trustee Nathan Hayes, Operations Director Linda Carson. Even the court reporter looked up, stunned. Grandpa turned to me, his voice trembling but proud. You'll inherit the house, kid, but not to live in. To open the door, I couldn't. We won't punish with hunger. We'll heal with supper. Mom's voice cracked through the silence. You're taking our home! Grandpa's eyes flashed for the first time. It was never yours, he said. You sold a man's last winter for a mortgage payment. I looked at my parents, the people who had raised me, lied to me, and thrown away the man who gave them everything. My throat tightened. I won't have you arrested, I said quietly. But you'll return every cent. And every Christmas, you'll work at No Room Kitchen. No photos, no speeches, no pretending. Just service, the judge nodded solemnly. Community service in lieu of incarceration, she confirmed, striking her gavel. So ordered. That night, snow fell thick over the Walker house as volunteers set up folding tables in the living room. We spread white cloths, trays of food, and old decorations from Grandpa's attic. In the center, we placed the antique table leaf, polished and shining like new. Neighbors trickled in, Ms. Ramirez, the mailman, even the church janitor. People who'd once peeked through curtains now stood shoulder to shoulder, laughing, eating, and passing plates. And at the head of it all, Grandpa sat in his rightful chair, the red ornament resting on his plate. He looked around, smiling softly. See, he whispered to me. There's always room if you move the table. Then his smile faltered. He pressed a hand to his chest, breath catching. Grandpa? I said, grabbing his arm. Don't, he gasped. Don't call an ambulance. I'm fine. But I could see he wasn't. His face went pale, his grip tightening on my wrist. He leaned close, his breath shallow, his words barely a whisper. The table is yours, he said. Keep it open. And then his hand went still. The sirens came fast. The room blurred with red and blue lights, but all I could hear was the faint echo of his voice, the promise, the legacy. My parents stood in the kitchen silently washing dishes for strangers, their tears mixing with the dishwater. A week later, No Room Kitchen opened officially. The sign hung by the door, the red ornament mounted above it. The clause itself was framed on the wall beside the deed. Linda ran the kitchen. I signed the checks. Every night someone found warmth inside, people who'd been forgotten just like him. Each December, we set one extra chair at the head of the table. Empty, waiting, glowing in candlelight, for anyone who has nowhere to go. And whenever I think of the text my parents sent that night, no room, I hear his voice answering from somewhere warm and peaceful. Move the table. A month later, the district attorney called. Evergreen Oaks wasn't just a scam. It was a laundering front that had stolen from over 20 elderly families. Grandpa's case broke it wide open. Dozens got their homes and savings back. Now people tell our story online. The man who hid a will inside a table and turned rejection into a feast. The title says it best. They said there was no room for Grandpa. So he moved the table and fed the whole town.